Hi guys, welcome to our live webinar. And I would like to thank everybody for coming. And I'm Samyukta Kumar, and with me I have Ritika Gopikrishna and Varushni, and we will be going through the PPT with you today and explain what exactly British Parliamentary debate is. But before that, I'd actually like to thank the college, the management, the core, and everybody for making this happen and giving us this wonderful opportunity to tell more people about British parliamentary debate. We in RECDU, the REC Debating Union, we debate, we encourage debating, and we go to tournaments all around India and gain a lot of experience in debating and mainly in British parliamentary debate. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk more about British parliamentary debate and get you familiarized with the rules and how exactly the format is and how to construct a case, so on and so forth. So let's get on with it.
So, hi guys, I'm Varushni, and so I'm going to be giving you the basic format and structure of the debate. So, can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes. So, there are so many types of debating models. Like there's British parliamentary debate, there's Asian parliamentary, there's Australian parliamentary, and so many. So, each and every kind of model has their own set of rules and different kind of formats as well. So, here in today's section, we're going to be primarily focusing on British parliamentary debate. Next slide. So first, we'll be looking into the basic structure of any debate room. So in a particular debate room, the chair will be announcing the motion. So motion is basically a statement or a topic that will be deciding on what the both the sides will be arguing over. So, for example, this house believes that animal testing should be banned. So, if this is the motion, then there'll be two sides arguing against it and for it. So, in a room, you basically have two sides. So, we have the government side as well as the opposition side. So, in the government side, the people belonging to the government side, they will go for the motion. So, basically, they'll have to build up cases along with supporting analysis to tell us why animal testing should be banned. On the other hand, the opposition team should come and tell us why animal testing should not be done. So basically, they go against the motion. And each and every side has two benches. So on the government side, we have opening government and closing government. On the opposition side, we have opening opposition and closing opposition. So in each and every bench, there are two members. So on a whole, 2 into 4 is equal to 8 speakers. So in a room, there'll be 8 speakers. Four for the motion, four speakers against the motion. And as the name suggests, the opening government and the opening opposition will be part of the opening half. The closing government and the closing opposition will be part of the closing half. And along with this, we have the adjudicating panel where there'll be a chair and two adjudicators will be judging the entire debate and announcing the verdict. So that's basically the basic structure of the debate. And now let's move on to the format of the debate. Sorry, the rules. So, so after receiving a motion, you and your partner will be given a preparation time of 15 minutes. So in this 15 minutes, you guys will be breaking down the motion, getting to the crux of it, building relevant cases along with analysis, and also be deciding which role to take. So that has to be done within the given 15 minutes of time. The next rule is usage of internet is prohibited during prep time. So if at all we catch you guys using your internet or mobile phones, you guys will be disqualified from the tournament. So please make sure you don't do that. And the next rule is once it's your turn to start your speech, you will be given a time limit of only 7 minutes maximum to finish off your entire debate. So make sure that you have all your cases concise and like to the point so that you can finish your speech within the given time limit. So the fourth rule is pre-handwritten or printed notes for reference is allowed. So if you've already brought any books or any kind of materials before entering into the debate room, it is allowed for reference. And the fifth rule is during the first minute and the sixth minute of a speaker's speech, the opposite team is not allowed to ask any POI. So that's basically the protected time. The first minute and the sixth minute are the protected time. But POIs are allowed between the second minute and the fifth minute. So I will be discussing about POIs later on. And the last rule is policy should be maintained. So there shouldn't be any kind of discrimination based on gender, caste, religion, or race. And we should use preferred pronouns for referring to any speakers. And also, any kind of personal accusation on the speaker is not allowed. So these are the basic rules that you guys have to follow in any kind of debate room, either it be in college level or international debate tournament level. These rules are same and mandatory as well. So now let's move on to the basic format of um, a debate room. So basically, as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, there are two sides, the government side and the opposition side. So the left column is the government side and the right column is the opposition side. So basically, there are two benches in each side, the opening and the closing. So as you can see, the first bench is the opening government. So they basically start the debate and they lay the basic foundation. And the bubbles next to the left of the speaker's names are the order by which the speeches will go on. So the first speech will be given by the Prime Minister. Next, it goes on to the leader of opposition from the opening opposition. Next, it moves on to the Deputy Prime Minister. Next, to the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Now, the opening half is over. Next, the closing half will be started by the member of government belonging to the closing government. Next to the government, sorry, the member of opposition. And at the end, we have whips from both the closing sides to summarize the speeches. So this is basically the format of any debate room and the order by which the speeches will go on. So now we'll be looking into detail of the roles of each and every speaker from every bench. So can we move on to the next slide? Yeah. So first we have the Prime Minister coming from the OG. So the Prime Minister has a very important role as the Prime Minister should break down and define the motion for the entire room. And if the interpretation of the motion given by the PM is either incorrect or invalid or not up to the mark, then the entire debate will be poor or below average. So the stronger the interpretation, the better the debate room will be. So that plays a very important role. And also, the PM uh, sets the scope of the debate and also lays down the basic foundation as well. And also, based on the interpretation the PM has given on the motion, he or she will have to give one or more supporting cases supporting their interpretation. So that is something the PM will be doing. Next, it moves on to the leader of opposition from the opposing team. So there might be very rare cases when the prime minister might not have given a proper definition of the motion, or the definition might be narrowed down in favoring of the government side. So if that's the case, then the leader of opposition has all the rights to redefine the motion and generalize it so that it could be like common for everybody. And so that is something that the leader of opposition can do. And also, LO should refute or build rebuttals against the PM's cases, and should also bring other new constructors from their own opposition side. So, and then we move on to the deputy prime minister and deputy leader of opposition. So, both of these speakers pretty much have the same role to play. So what they'll be doing is they will be rebutting against the case that has already been built by their opposition, respective opposition team. So, for example, the deputy prime minister will review the case given by the leader of opposition and also rebuild the case the prime minister has already given before, and along with new supporting arguments. So that's what the deputy prime minister will be doing. At the same time, I mean, on the other hand, deputy leader of opposition will rebut the cases of the OG, that is both the prime ministers and the deputy prime minister's speech, and rebuild the cases of their partner, that is the leader of opposition, and along with new supporting arguments and relevant analysis. So this is what the BPM and DLO will be doing. And next we move on to the roles of the speakers belonging to the closing half. So the member of government starts the closing half. And so again, here both the member of government and member of opposition pretty much have the same role. So they basically defend the direction of their respective opening half, but most importantly, bring in a new dimension or a perspective. So what the member of government will be doing is he or she will be like bringing a new bringing a new dimension or perspective to a point that the opening government has already given, and that's pretty much the same what the member of opposition will also be doing, but to their respective opening house. And another thing that they'll be doing is to another general thing that they'll be doing is to continue to give rebuttals against their respective opposite. So that is like that remains the same. There's no change in that. And also there might be cases where both the member of government and no, generally the closing house in general might run out of points. So let's say during the preparation time, the closing house will like around 4 to 5 cases. There are very high possibilities of the opening house taking almost most of their points or no points at all. If that's the case, then both the closing house can take up a point already mentioned by their respective open house and give more deep analysis and more reasoning to their cases and make the cases more stronger. And that will make the cases more valid and their point will stand over the opening house if the reasoning is more stronger. So that is something that both the members of government and opposition can do. And at the end, we have both the whips from both the government side and the opposition side. So all they do is to summarize the entire debate, but mostly skew towards their own respective sides and mostly inclined to their respective benches. So the government whip will summarize the entire debate, skewed in favor of the government side, mostly inclined towards the closing government, and the opposition whip does the same towards the opposition side and mostly inclined towards the closing government. This is what they'll be doing, and also both the whips will have to give strong reasons why their respective closing benches stand above the other three benches in the debate. And also a very important thing, the whips are not allowed to bring in any new arguments or cases. All they have to do is to summarize the points that have already been passed. So basically, these are the roles of all the speakers belonging to the closing half. So now moving on to the next slide.
Thank you, Varishni. So now that you know the format of the British parliamentary debate and the basic rules, I'm going to tell you how to make a case, like how you're going to use the 15 minutes, and what now, like what are constructives, what are extensions. I'm going to tell you all of those things so you can make your own case. So first thing is first, each team has two speakers. So but then both the speakers belong to one team. So we don't want speaker one to have their speech about a particular topic, and then the second speaker to have a speech about another topic. We want continuity between the speeches. So this you work this out with your partner during your prep time. So you get 15 minutes of prep time, as Varishni said, before you actually enter your room. So when you get this time, you spend this time with your partner and discuss the basic points of the motion and what exactly both of you are going to talk about, and have a continuity between both of your speeches. That is point one. Point two. So what is you have to using the prep time, you have to find out the crux of the motion and the key points. So what exactly do I mean by crux? Crux is the most important part of the motion. The crux of the debate is what the whole debate revolves around. It affects everything that happens in the debate. So that is the crux of the debate. And key points are the most valued points that, when analyzed and when explained, that it'll give you the most value out of it. Okay. So for example, if you have this house believes that animal testing should not be banned, then your crux of the motion will be either you're going to ban it or you're not going to ban it. So is animal testing good or bad? Why should you ban it? So that you're going to explain things like that if you're on the government side, and you have to explain if you're on the opponent side. You're going to have to explain why you shouldn't ban it, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that is point two, and point three is forming constructives. So constructives are basically arguments or basic points, and you analyze those to form your case. Analysis will be done by Ritika further down the presentation. But for now, I'm just going to tell you what exactly are constructives. So let's take the very motion. This house believes that animal testing should be banned. Okay. So in such a case, the government side is going to explain as to why exactly you should ban it and why it is bad. So you'll explain that the food chain is going to be affected if you're going to, um, put chemicals on animals and so on and so forth, and how the food chain is going to be affected. So that will be a constructive on the government side. But on the opposition side, you're gonna come up and say that, okay, no, we're okay with that happening because we're moving in a really fast paced world, and we need development to move on, and we need development to match the speed of technology, and so on and so forth. So those are your constructives. Now, when you come to examples, that is point four, examples support your case. So it's a different thing if I tell you, okay, animal testing is bad, but it's a completely different thing if I'm going to come out and tell you, okay, it's bad because it harms the animals, and I give you an example, a relatable example. So the more relatable or the more simple your examples are, the more convincing it is for your chair or your judges. The judges are also known as chairs and panel over here. So it is more convincing for them to give understand your case more, and it'll support your case a lot. So examples are very important. And okay, the fifth point is burden. So what do I mean by burden? Burden is basically the responsibility of each speaker or each bench. So like in as a government, as the government speaker, I my burden is to prove to you that why animal testing is bad and why we should stop it. So okay, so why we should stop it. And in the opposition side, you're supposed to explain as to why it is okay for us to have animal testing, and how it's going to affect our development if we're going to stop animal testing, and why it is good to have it. So that is the government on that is the burden on the government side, and the burden on the opposition side. So the sixth point is extension. So what do I mean by extensions? So many people can define extensions in different ways, but two main ideas of extensions are, so basically extensions are used by the closing half, because why what happens is closing half comes into the debate a little later. So there are chances that the opening half takes up your points because you come on later in the debate. So what do you do in situations like this? You use extensions, because sometimes the opening government or opening opposition cannot necessarily analyze completely all of their points. So as the closing half, what you can do is you can take up those points and completely analyze it. That is one type of extension. Another way, another meaning for extension is giving a new dimension to an argument. So for example, if I'm going to explain a political effect of a particular implementation, and as the opening half, I take up all the points as political. So and what does the closing half do? They thought of political, but now their points are gone. So now they use extensions. They come thinking of a new dimension. Instead of political, they think of an economic effect, or a religious effect, and so on and so forth. This gives a new perspective to the argument, and helps more people get a new idea of what an argument can also be. Moving on. Okay, so those are basically the main ways how you can make a case, and if you're in the opening half or the closing half. And some things that you're not supposed to do as a debater are as follows. Firstly, you're not supposed to reduce the burden or the scope of the debate. So if I'm going to take this house believes that animal testing should be banned, then if we're talking about this in a global scale, right? So if I'm going to say that no, if I'm going to define the motion as animal testing should not be banned in India, that means I'm reducing the scope of the debate from a global scale to a country level scale, right? So that is reducing the scope and reducing your burden. You're not thinking about the global part now. You're thinking only about only country wise. So this is gonna, this is not going to fetch you enough points. Now, when it comes to squirreling, okay, so squirreling is basically giving a perspective to the debate that favors your side. So there's a difference between debating for your side and changing the perspective towards your side. So for example, if I'm going to say that this very motion that this house believes that animal testing should be banned, so either the government side is supposed to explain why it should be banned, and the opposite side is supposed to explain why it should not be banned. So in this case, if a team comes up and says that no, some for a few days we're going to test animals, and then a few days we won't, that doesn't necessarily fall under banning or not banning. It comes it comes in the middle, and it skews the perspective into their favor. So such things are called squirreling, and this is frowned upon by many debaters and can be marked, and debaters are marked down for this. Now, knifing. So in a team, you have two people, and when your partner says something contradictory to what you said, So if I'm going as a prime minister and I say something, and then my deputy prime minister, my teammate, comes and says something that's exact opposite of what I'm saying, then that my partner is knifing me because that's not the case that we're going towards. Similarly, for example, if the OG comes and says something, and then the closing government says something opposite to what the opening government said, that is also known as knifing. This is not just particular to the government. If this works for the opposition side also, so that is knifing. And okay, so irrelevancy. So when I talk about this very same motion, this house believes that animal testing should be banned. If I'm going to talk about how I'm going to ban it, what animals am I considering, all those things are out of the scope of the debate. It doesn't necessarily come under why exactly should I ban it, why is it bad, and so on. So that is irrelevant to the motion, and that will be marked down for. So these are things that you should watch out for and not do when you're making a speeches or debate. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, so now that we know how to make a case, let's move on to the types of motions there are. So there are two types of motions mainly. One is principle and the other is policy. So after I explain this, I want you guys to tell me what type of motion is the motion I just told you all this while. This house believes that animal testing should be banned. What type of motion is it? Tell me after I finish explaining this. Let me know in the comments below. Okay, so what exactly is a principal motion? So a principal motion basically focuses on the why part of the motion. It expects you to debate on the principle. It doesn't necessarily expect you to explain how you're going to do it, when is it done, so on and so forth. It just wants logical, reasonable points as to why exactly you should or should not implement a particular statement. For example, this house believes that India owes its progress to colonization. So in such cases, you have to explain why exactly colonization is not why exactly colonization helped India, or why was it good. And as an opposition side, you have to explain why it did not help India, why was it bad. That is principal motion. Similarly, when we come to policy motion, it doesn't necessarily stick to the why part, but mainly also has the how part. So what exactly do I mean by the how part? This is where models come into play. So policy motions require you to make models. The model answers the how part. So, for example, this house would ban extensive media coverage of mass shootings. So, this just not only expects you to explain why exactly it's bad, but you have to explain how. So, as an organization or an entity, what would you do to reduce this, or how are you going to reduce, extensive coverage? So, if there's something gruesome, then how are you going to cover it from now? Are you going to cover anything at all? What do you consider gruesome? All those things come under model. So, you have to make up your own model with your own partner and explain how exactly you're going to do what you're going to do. You have to consider a lot of factors like the age factor. Are children allowed? Are only adults allowed? Or not in this case, but in many other cases, a lot of times age restrictions come into play, and you have to take into account all of that when you make a model. So yeah, those are the two types of motions: principal and policy motion. And let me know what type of motion is the motion I told you. This house believes that animal testing should be banned. Now I'm moving on to the next slide. Ritika, I'll take over from here.
Okay, so hi guys, this is Ritika Gopikrishna and I'll be dealing with analysis right now. So we've already looked at what constructives are, right? But to build a case around these constructives, you need to take the help of analysis. So what you do is you dig deeper and deeper into the motion, so you understand what are the effects what these effects will be if suppose this motion comes into effect. Okay, so the consequences of of the motion, and we have to analyze what kind of path we will take to achieve the outcome. Okay, so now to do this, we first have to answer two questions. One is, why do we do analysis? One thing is because we have to construct the case so we can have enough ammunition to convince the chair why our case is stronger than the other person's. And the other reason is because this can be also very like this has the power to make or break your case, because if you have a very strong analysis, then it can entirely break the opposition's case. Okay, so you have to get this right and to choose which kind of analysis, because you have different kinds of analysis, and in this I'll be taking you through all the different kinds of analysis you can do. You have to choose which one will best suit your motion. Okay, so now who will do the analysis? Any speaker can do the analysis, but what you have to understand is the whip can also do analysis, but he shouldn't bring extra material into the debate. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, let us look at the first kind of analysis we have. So first we have timeline analysis. Okay? In this, we are going to look at the timeline. So like earlier, what was the scenario? Right now, what is the scenario? And in the future, what's going to be the effects if the motion comes into effect? Okay? So for let us take an example. So what I do is I take an example for every kind of analysis for you to understand how to choose which analysis you have to give for which kind of motion, because you don't have to give all kinds of analysis to every motion you get. Okay, so that is something, that is a knack you have to develop. You will develop it as you practice more and more of debating. Okay, so now if I have to take an example to explain timeline analysis, let us look at this motion that was given to we were given this motion during our MSR tournament at Bangalore last year. Okay? So the motion is we are supposed to we have to bring up, should we bring about straight pride movement or not? So that was the motion. Okay? So if suppose you're working for the opposition, now you're saying we do not need state right movement, then we can take the help of a timeline analysis. So how can you do that? You can tell how it was in the past when we did not have enough support for these LGBT people belonging to the LGBTQ community. So back then, people used to shun people belonging to these communities. They were alienated. So that was the scenario, and you're supposed to talk about that, like picture, I mean, show them, paint a gruesome picture of how badly they were treated. And then in the present situation where you have LGBTQ pride movements, how people are becoming a little more accepting of these people in society, and how it's like how people in these communities are making an effort, and people outside these communities are making an effort to use this pride movement as a platform for more dialogue about this community. So we can sort of integrate them into our own community. Okay, so now you can talk about how the efforts of these people are going to be diminished or defeated if you bring about a straight pride movement, right? Because so that is how you're going to portray it. So since now if you're going to bring a straight pride movement, you're going to like pull down the efforts of the LGBTQ community and defeat the very purpose of an LGBTQ pride movement itself. So that is how you can give a timeline analysis of how it was in the past, how it is in the present, and how it is in the future. So now moving over to the next slide. Now, if you have to explain how, if you have if you have a state pride movement, how is it going to affect your how is it going to affect the efforts put by the people belonging to the LGBTQ community? For that, you can take the help of social analysis and religious analysis. So this is where you have to understand that you can also club two kinds of analysis together. Okay. So now in sector analysis, we have 5 major kinds of effects you can deal with. Now, for this LGBTQ, the most relevant will be social and religious effects. So, if you have to analyze based on the social effects, what you can talk about is right now, if you take India, even though we have Section 377, people are still facing a lot of hate. Like, even though legally it is allowed to marry within your own gender, people are still looking down upon these people. So they consider homosexuality wrong, and they even consider it like a mental illness and are even suggesting a cure. So in such a situation, what will happen if you bring about a state pride movement? Because people belonging to the government are going to argue, how are you claiming that we're going to diminish your efforts because we are just celebrating our own sexuality, right? So what you can say is, this is where you have to club. Now that you've already explained socially how these people belonging to this LGBTQ communities are suffering, you can club it with religious effects, where you can talk about how in certain communities, people like Christianity and Muslim people, according to the Bible or the Quran, it is a sin to practice or support homosexuality, or So what happens is they like that there'll always be people who want to go against this homosexuality, go against LGBTQ community. So what they'll do, they'll take the help of these state pride movements. So they'll use these state pride movements as an anti-LGBTQ movement, right? So this is what is going to happen. So this is obviously going to destroy the efforts that these people belonging to these LGBTQ communities have been putting, right? So that is how you can explain and say this is actually very powerful. Because of this point, you can actually try and convince the judge or the chair why we shouldn't have a straight pride movement, and that is why analysis is very important. Okay. So now, if you have to look at the other effects here, we have political effects, security effects, and economic effects. Okay. Okay, so I'll give you an example of a motion where I can talk about political effects and security effects. Okay. So if you're going to take an example, if you're going to take the concept of gentrification, so the motion has something to do with should we implement is it this house should implement gentrification. So if you have to, okay, so basically what is gentrification? It is changing the character of a neighborhood by bringing in more affluent people into that area, but that area was earlier accommodated by people belonging to the slums or less affluent people. Okay, so that area is given to more affluent people. And where would these people belonging to these slums go? They will have to go find their own place, which is very hard, obviously, because they're staying in slums because they do not have enough means to find their own place. So in this situation, the effects you can look at is political effects and security effects. Okay? So this is how you can analyze. You can take the political effects and talk about how if government goes ahead with this plan, obviously people belonging to the slums are going to go against this. Okay? But how are they going to hit back? They're going to stop voting for the ruling party who suggested this or who brought about this gentrification. And since most of the population fall under this like slum category, there'll be a lot of votes that won't be going for this political party. So this is how you can actually talk about the political effects this motion is going to have. So that is political effects. So if you have to talk about security effects, you want to analyze based on security effects, you can talk about two things. One, you can talk about these people belonging to slums. Obviously, they're losing their homes. They don't know where else to go. So that is posing a huge threat to their lifestyle. And so obviously that is affecting their security, right? So you can talk about that. The second thing is you can also talk about the people. Okay, so now one thing you have to understand is when you're giving explanation or analysis for this, you have to try and talk about the security of the primary stakeholders involved in this. Okay, so now primary stakeholders in this situation is obviously the slum people. Now, if you want to move on and analyze further and talk about the secondary stakeholders, it will be those people who are now accommodating these places that were earlier occupied by the slum people. So now, since they have come there, obviously these people belonging to the slums are going to take out their anger on the people who have come to accommodate their houses, because they can't obviously take out their anger on the government. So what they do is they might come attack the people who are living in their previous houses. Okay, so that is what happens. So this is also posing a threat to their security. So that is how you can analyze on security. So this is how you can convince the chair telling why it is a bad idea to implement the motion, because it's going to have some serious security issues. It's going to have political issues. So you can choose whichever effect will be most relevant to your motion and explain accordingly. Okay. So now, if we have to talk about the economical effects, now I'll take some other motion which will be more relevant. Okay. So now, if you're going to look at something called female employability test. So what happens is some companies like even Amazon, they conduct separate employability tests for women. And why is that? Because these companies believe there is not much equilibrium in the ratio of men and women in their companies, and by keeping such tests, they can manage that. They can maintain an equilibrium in that ratio. So they conduct this test. So what happens in this situation is if you're going to consider economical effects, obviously since the test that is kept only for women, they're going to reduce the standards of the test, and it's not going to be as high as a common employability test, right? So in that case, you're not. So obviously you have to like compromise on the skill these people who enter the company through this employability test have. Okay, so this poses a threat to the quality of people working in the company. So what is this going to do in the longer run? It is obviously going to be bad for the company, and at a larger scale it will be bad for the economy as well. So this is how you can talk about the economical aspects. Okay, now so now moving on to the next slide. So this is where we talk about stakeholder approach, right? So who are stakeholders? Stakeholders are those people who are going to be affected by the motion if the motion comes into effect. Okay. So now there are two kinds of things. Two kinds of stakeholders. One is primary stakeholder. One is secondary stakeholder. Primary stakeholders are those who are going to be directly affected by the motion, and secondary stakeholders are going to be less affected or indirectly affected by the motion. Okay, so now if you want to take an example, let us take the example of this employability test. So who are going to be primary stakeholders? Obviously women are going to be primary stakeholders, because as we spoke, this test is meant for women, and this test might make reduce the difficulty level for women to enter the company, right? So primary stakeholders will be women. If you're going to consider the secondary stakeholders, it's going to be men, because men are not directly affected by this employability test, but if you look at it indirectly, obviously men are going to be finally because affected, because most of the slots will be taken for women, right? When there are separate women employability tests, so those slots men are not accessible to those slots. So in such a situation, men are going to be indirectly affected. So that is going to fall. So men are going to fall under secondary stakeholder. So this is another kind of analysis you can do. Moving over to the next slide. So next we have worst case, best case comparison. Okay, this is very, very important because this can make or break your case. Okay, because all you have to do in this situation is just say why your case is better than their best case. So if you're going to say that, obviously that's like completely breaking the other person's case, and this can directly convince the judge why your case is best. Okay, so what you have to do. So what do you mean by this? Let us take the example of the employability test again. If you're going to consider, so suppose say I am opposition and I am saying I do not want such an employability test that is only for women. What I'll say is my worst case is better than their best case. So what is their best case? Their best case is they managed to get this employability test for women, and obviously their best case is if they manage to maintain a sort of equilibrium in the ratio of men and women. That is their best case. So what happens? So that is in the short term. Obviously, you're going to see the ratio increase for women, and they'll achieve what they want because it's their best case. But what will happen in the long term is, because once you enter the company, obviously, since they have compromised on the quality of people who entered because they've reduced the standards for the test, they're going to have problems within the company, right? So this is going to reduce the efficiency of workers in that company, and this is going to affect the company eventually. So even in their best case, over a period of time, their best case itself is going to become their worst case, right? So that is why I am going to say now, since I've already spoken about their best case, I'm going to talk about my worst case. My worst case is if suppose this motion is not implemented. That is, if a motion is implemented. That is, if suppose there is employability test, if an employability test is not conducted, then what happens? That is my worst case, right? So then what happens is the ratio is not maintained. So that in the short term, people might say, since the ratio is not maintained, this is going to create some sort of inequality for us, right? So, but what we can see in the long run is more and more women to be able to crack the common employability test. They're going to put in more hours of work, right? So now, if you're going to take logical ability, people assume that men are better at logical ability, and that is why people have these women employability tests. So it is easier for women to crack the coding test. If suppose you're considering a software company. So now, since logical ability is something you can work on, women can actually they're going to strive harder to crack the common employability test, and they're going to work on their skill. And finally, when they manage to crack the employability test, once they enter the company, without that biased employability test, they will get more respect than they would have gotten in the other case. Okay, because if they had entered through employability test that was only meant for women. Obviously, the people in the company wouldn't respect them as much as they would if they wrote the common employability test and got it. So this is going to actually, in the long run, work better for these people because it's going to help maintain more equality between men and women, right? So that is how you can talk. So basically, what I've done right now is I've told my worst case, which is if suppose the employability test is not there and because of that ratio is not maintained, is much better than their best case in the long run. Okay. So once you manage to establish this properly, you can even like you can convince the chair immediately by you don't have to think twice. I'm presenting to you my case, which is obviously better, obviously more feasible because even my worst case is better than their best case, right? So now that is our worst case, best case comparison. Now moving over to the next slide, we have something called characterization. Okay, so characterization is the process of building a narrative around the primary stakeholders. Okay, so you have to put yourself into the shoes of the primary stakeholder and tell what kind of situations the primary stakeholders will go through, and you have to analyze on that. So for example, let us take a motion where they are suggesting to wipe out the criminal records of a criminal, say a murderer, after he commits the murder. Once he served a particular amount of jail time, once he comes out, you have to wipe out his criminal record. So when he's applying for jobs, people don't know that he was once convicted and he was in the jail, right? So if suppose this motion asks you to wipe out the criminal records, if suppose your government and you're supporting the statement why you should wipe it out, what you can say is you can characterize on it. How are you going to characterize on it? Take an example of a person. Say this suppose a person commits a murder and then spends fix the particular number of time in the jail, years in the jail, and then manages to come out after serving the entire period. And then you can believe that that person has religiously completed that entire jail time and now might be a changed man, right? But now once he comes out of jail after serving that jail time also, people are going to look down upon him in society. And suppose he has this record when he goes when he tries to apply for a job, people are going to think twice before taking him in, right? Because he has a bad record of killing people. So this is so what happens because of this is there can be two things. One thing is he's going to get demoralized, and he might also end up ending his life, right? Because he is already like paid for what he's done, and in spite of that, he's facing the consequences after he has come out. Okay? Even though he has changed, so that is why. That is the characterization you can give because he might get demoralized and end up ending his own life. Another thing is because he's come out and now he's a changed man, and even then he's not being given respect in society because of a mistake he committed in the past. What happens is he starts thinking to himself, okay, now see, I've actually paid for what I did also, and now also I'm not getting the respect. So what I do? So he will be motivated to commit more crimes in the future. So he won't think twice because anyway he's not benefiting from spending so much time in the jail. So he might end up committing more crimes itself. So that will become like a vicious cycle, right? So he might continue doing it. So this is what is scary about not wiping criminal records. So this is a government's case where you're saying yes, let us wipe criminal records. Okay, so you're basically characterizing and you're building a narrative around the primary stakeholder. Okay? So you can do that. Another form of characterization is you can like choose any and you can talk about the effects the motion would have on the different demographics. Okay, like you can talk about a particular gender, how will it affect a particular race, how will it affect people with a certain annual income, how will it affect? So if you're going to take the same motion where you're trying to like wipe out the criminal records of a criminal, what you can talk about is you can talk about how it would affect when the person we spoke about, the primary stakeholder, that person belongs to a particular race. Say if he's a black man, or if suppose he belongs to a minority religion. So obviously he's going to face more shunning in society, right? So even that is going to affect him. So so you can use all these keys to build a case which can make your case stronger, because constructives are going to be important points that you can give, but you have to build cases around these, because points are not going to win you debates. Cases are going to win you debates, and something that's very crucial to a successful case is analysis. Okay, so that is why we have to do analysis properly. If you have any questions, you can put them down below, and at the end of the session, I'll answer them. Thank you. Moving over to Samyukta.
Okay, so now we'll be moving on to the next slide. So we'll be looking into what rebuttals and POIs are. So rebuttals are basically statements that you make to oppose or weaken the opponent's claim. So, for example, let's take the motion. This house believes that animal testing should be banned, and the government side comes and tells me that gives me some reason why it should be banned. So the opposition side should come and pinpoint that reason, and not only tell it's invalid or not ideal in the real world, but also give a proper reasoning as to why um, their point or their case is weak, and why your reasoning or your solution to it is better than theirs. So the stronger you make your reasoning, the more the possibility of you breaking down their point and taking over it. So that is what a rebuttal is, and uh, you can use these rebuttals to make comparisons to your own case and explain why your case is stronger or more ideal than the opposite case. This is how you can use rebuttals to link to your own arguments. And at the end, and also rebuttals can be used to explain extensions by giving more reasoning and proper analysis. So this is what rebuttals mean. So now that you know have a rough idea of what rebuttal means, so let me ask you a question. So, like, let's take the same case and let's assume that the government side comes and tells me that animal testing is cruel because you're keeping animals in captivity for a long time and also conducting several experiments, and at the end, they're getting killed anyways. But also, they're very ineffective because most of the di- most of the I mean these animals don't even get most of the diseases that humans get. Like they don't get HIV or they don't get like many types of cancer. So in that case, like why do you even have to do animal testing? Is Let's assume this is a case brought up by the government side. So please drop in a possible rebuttal that you can give from the opposition side in the comment box next to your video. So now let's move on to POIs. So as I mentioned earlier, POIs are points of information or normal basic questions that the opposite team can ask you during your speech. So reiterating another rule, POIs are not allowed in the first minute and the sixth minute of a speaker. It's only allowed between the second and the fifth minute. And the time limit for each and every POI is only 15 seconds. And at the end, the speaker can either accept or reject the POIs completely his or her wish. But in a good debate room, it's mostly advisable for him or her to take at least two, because it serves like a good pathway to prove them wrong and justify their point even more, and it basically builds their case more stronger and better. So another thing about POIs is you can only ask the second or third POI only after 15 seconds. So you can't continuously keep dodging the speakers by asking POIs, and that's called heckling, which is not allowed. And POIs are really important because that is the only way both the opening half and the closing half can interact, because like both of them don't get the opportunity to directly interact with each other. So only by asking questions, that is POIs, can they interact. So this is why rebuttals and POIs are very important. So now moving on to Samikta, she'll be explaining to you guys about the tips and tricks that you guys can follow in a debate.
Thank you, Varashni. So, since you know the basic rules of British parliamentary debate, you know how to make your own case, you know how to manage prep time with your partner, and so on. I'd like to give you a few tips and tricks. So, firstly, manage prep time with your partner. So, like, see, a lot of people just think that okay, if I just talk it out with my partner and then write my own notes, that's it. My prep time is done. I don't have to do anything else. But there's a lot more to that than just talking to your partner. you have to like discuss and come up with proper key points that both of you can analyze about. And supposing the first speaker doesn't get to analyze it completely, the second speaker the second speaker can continue that analysis and make sure the flow goes on. So, and during this prep time, you talk to your partner and say that this is what I think the crux of the debate is. What do you think? Discuss with your partner, and this is the time when you can think about what the opponent benches can come up with and try and rebut them beforehand. So when they actually come up with it, you don't have to think about anything then and there, but you actually would have thought about it before. So think of possible things, and this is what, and you can do a lot more things in prep, and these are some of them you can do during the prep time. So secondly, use colored pens to highlight key points. So I personally use blue to write down my points and black to mark POIs and rebuttals and so on. This actually is very helpful, even though it seems very obvious. Not a lot of people do it. When people actually go up on the stage and speak, if everything is in one ink, you might skip a point or two, and that might be a very important point. You might forget to analyze something. You might forget to rebut something. So in such cases, color coding your notes is actually very helpful, because you get to see if the color stands out, and you'll know, okay, fine, this I need to address this issue, and I'm going to address this issue next. And once you say it out loud, you will do it eventually. So that is point 2. Point 3, note taking. So during prep time, a lot of people prefer have a different way of taking notes. Some people like writing in paragraph, some people write bullet points, some people just use flashcards, and some people don't take notes at all, although that's a very rare case. But yeah, and that is completely up to you. But during a debate, when you are listening to your speakers, it's advisable to write down their points so you can rebut it really well and come up with points that interact with your other benches. And during this time, if you're going to take down full sentences, exactly what they're saying, it's going to be difficult for you to keep up with the next sentence they're saying and keep up with the debate. So taking them down in taking the notes down is actually in a concise manner is actually very helpful. And okay, so when the fourth point is actually very important, and not many people realize this, but you must receive constructive feedback from your chair. So again, the chair is the main judge of the debate, and they announce the verdict after discussing with the panelists. So yeah, after your debate, it doesn't matter if you came first or if you came fourth. You go to your chair and ask them what exactly what could you have done to make your speech better? What could you have done to improve your format of your speech, the way you speak? Is there anything I could have done to bring up new constructives? Go ahead, ask your chair. They'll be more than happy to help you. So it'll make your speeches stronger. You'll be able to think outside the box. They'll tell you what not possible things you could have said. So such things make your speech and case much more stronger the next time. So the next time you debate, if you apply whatever you learned the previous debate, you're improving, right? And improvement is good. So yeah, and also one more thing is, if you're opening government, it is very difficult for you to engage with your opposition opponent teams. Like opening government and closing opposition interaction is pretty difficult. So it's kind of difficult for the and because this interaction is very necessary. So opening government is it's ideal for opening governments to take more POIs and ask more POIs to the closing opposition mainly, so that they get that interaction that they missed out because they were first. Right. So there are so many other things that we can talk about, like like let's take public speaking. Many people are scared to get on stage and speak and so on. So one thing that people can do to get attention of the people of the audience is to wait a minute and look at, and make eye contact with the people in the audience, right? So that will get them the attention. They'll captivate their audience that way. That is one point. And sometimes a lot of people find this useful, that if you come and stand at the end of the stage, it actually reduces your stage fright. Why is this? It's because you have more, your fear of falling off the stage is more than actually you getting scared about speaking something wrong. So that is how you deal with stage fright and so on. So yeah, those are some few tips and tricks that I can tell you guys. So let me know, is there anything you do to cope with stage fright? Are you scared to speak? And like, have you debated before? Give me more, tell me more about your debating experience on the comments below. And yeah, that's it. We have come to the end of our presentation. If you guys have any sorts of questions, put it down on the comments. We'll be more than happy to help you. And yeah, thank you for sitting through the presentation.